What if the galaxy's most feared predators didn't come to conquer, but to introduce their children? When a lone scientist answers a mysterious signal on a forgotten planet, he discovers not monsters, but a species testing humanity's greatest strength, compassion. What follows is a breathtaking first contact that rewrites everything we thought we knew about trust, power, and the future of life beyond Earth. If you're new here, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and show thumbs up by liking the video. Now let's jump into the story. After 17 missions and just as many dead ends, Dr. Milo Hart was almost ready to give up. The Calypso drift drifted quietly through the edge of uncharted space, its scanners flickering with static and silence. Milo sat in the observation chamber, staring out at the dull, rust-colored planet below Juno 7. It looked like all the others, quiet, dusty, and long forgotten. But then, the signal came. It started as a flicker on the psychic sensor, a ray faint but unmistakably structured. Milo leaned in, eyes wide. The signal repeated, not once, but 3 times, forming a steady rhythm. This wasn't a natural pulse. This was communication. Sia, are you seeing this? He asked over the comms, C.L. Rayner, the ship's pilot and his longtime travel partner, replied with her usual dry humor. Either we found intelligent life or Juno 7 has a heartbeat. Either way, spooky. Milo didn't laugh. He was already scanning deeper into the planet's atmosphere, adjusting the frequencies, tracking the source. Something on the northern continent was moving something big. Heat signatures began to appear on the screen, large and slow, but coordinated. There were no cities, no lights, no technology. But there was life. Something was alive down there. And it knew they were here. By the time Security Chief Jaron Vosk arrived at the bridge, Milo had already ordered the sensors to zoom in on the forested region. Tall, spiraling trees created a thick green canopy. Between them, blurry figures moved, massive shapes that didn't match any database records. Dr. Hart, Jaron said, folding his arms, "Tell me you're not thinking about landing." Milo didn't answer immediately. He couldn't take his eyes off the scanner feed. They're responding to us. That pulse? It's coming from them. They're trying to talk. Sial leaned back in her chair. Or lure us in for dinner. Jaron, towering and serious, wasn't amused. You've heard the stories. The Siltharn. Apex predators. Stronger than any war beast. Smarter than most councils, and absolutely not friendly. No one's ever proven they exist, Milo argued. Every report is secondhand, based on myths and fears. What if we're the first to actually make contact, real contact? Or the last, Jaron muttered. Despite the warnings, Milo made his case to command. They were here to study, to understand, not just to take pretty pictures from orbit. After a tense discussion, the decision was made. They would send a probe to scout the landing zone. The probe dropped through the atmosphere like a falling star, scanning the forest edge. Trees swayed gently in the wind, and for a moment, nothing moved. Then shadows shifted. Milo leaned closer to the screen. From between the trees, something stepped into the clearing, tall, sleek, and moving with the grace of a predator. Milo's breath caught. The creature was enormous, at least twice the height of a man, with limbs that moved like liquid muscle and eyes that glowed faintly gold. Its skin shimmered in the light, not fur, but some kind of scaled surface that changed color as it moved. "That's one of them," Milo whispered. "It has to be." More figures appeared behind it, watching. They didn't approach. They just waited, still and silent. Jaron grunted. "They're watching us watch them. That's not good." Before they could analyze further, the largest creature stepped forward again. This time, it wasn't alone. Clutched gently in its mouth was something small, a bundle, twitching slightly, with tiny limbs. Double quotes, "What?" "Is that?" CL asked, squinting at the screen. Milo's heart raced. "It's a cub, a youngling. The adult Sylpharn walked into the middle of the clearing and set the cub on the ground, just 10 meters from the probe. Then it stepped back, rejoining the others. For a long moment, no one spoke. On the screen, the cub wobbled on its oversized legs, sniffed the air, and let out a soft chirping sound. Milo turned to the others. "They're not attacking. They're not hiding. They brought us their young." Cial blinked. "Why would they do that?" Jaren didn't move. "Maybe to see what we'll do with it." Milo stood up. His hands trembled slightly, but his voice was steady. "We have to go down there now." "You've lost your mind," Jaren growled. But Cial looked at the screen again. The cub had moved closer to the probe, poking at it with its snout, curious, but not afraid. The adults remained still, watchful, but not hostile. "I think he's right," Cial said quietly. "I don't think this is a trap." Milo turned to her, surprised. "You believe me?" "I believe something rare is happening," she said. "And if we don't go, we may never know what it is." An hour later, the shuttle broke through the clouds and descended toward the clearing. Milo sat at the window, watching the forest. "Get closer," his heart beating in time with the ship's hum. Below, 3 large shapes waited near the trees. And between them, the little cub stood alone, looking up, as if it had been waiting just for them. Milo didn't know what would happen next, but he knew one thing for sure. This wasn't a story about monsters. It was a story about being seen and maybe being trusted. The shuttle touched down with a soft hiss, its landing gear settling into the grassy clearing just beyond the forest. The trees surrounding them were towering and still, as if the forest itself was holding its breath. Dr. Milo Hart stood at the hatch, fully suited, his heart thudding hard in his chest. From the window, he could see the small Sylpharn cub still standing in the open, its wide golden eyes locked on the shuttle. Behind it, 3 huge shapes loomed just inside the tree line, unmoving but clearly watching. "Last chance to back out," Sia said from the pilot's seat, her voice quiet but steady. Milo didn't answer. He opened the hatch slowly. The alien air flowed in clean, cool, and carrying a strange scent that reminded him of pine and something metallic. He stepped onto the soft ground, his boots sinking slightly into the mossy earth. The cub took a step toward him. Milo stopped, holding very still. He didn't want to scare it. The little creature wobbled forward again, its legs unsteady but determined. Up close, it looked even more unusual. Its skin was a smooth blend of soft scales, its eyes too big for its face, and it made a low chirping sound, like a curious bird. It stopped just 2 feet away and sat down, tilting its head like it was trying to figure him out. Behind the cub, one of the adults shifted. Milo glanced up and froze. The adult Sylpharn had stepped further into the clearing. It was enormous, at least 3 times Milo's height, and built like a cross between a panther and a dragon. Its scales shimmered with shifting colors, and its golden eyes gleamed with intelligence. But its movements were slow, controlled, not aggressive. Cial's voice crackled in Milo's earpiece. "Milo ... that one just moved." "I see it," he said quietly. The adult walked forward a few more steps, then stopped. It lowered its head slightly, as if in greeting, then gently nudged something else forward. Another cub, this one slightly smaller, emerged from behind its legs, blinking in the sunlight. A moment later, a third joined the first 2. Now, 3 young Sylpharn cubs sat in a line between the adult and Milo. They looked at him with open curiosity, chirping and stumbling over their big paws. Milo didn't move. He didn't need to. They were coming to him, one by one. The cubs approached. The smallest one sniffed his boot and let out a strange squeak. The boldest climbed up onto his leg like a cat, trying to get a better view. The third just plopped down beside him and started chewing on the edge of his glove. "They're not hostile," Milo said softly into his cum. They single quotes playing. I'm looking at it, and I still don't believe it, Xiao replied. Are you sure we're not being distracted while the big ones plan something? I don't think so, Milo said. They're not acting like predators. They're acting like parents. He knelt down slowly. The cubs didn't flinch. One of them climbed into his lap and curled up, making a soft rumble that vibrated through his suit. Milo reached out carefully and touched the top of its head. The scales were warm and smooth, and the cub leaned into his hand like it had been waiting for him. I don't think this is a trick, Milo said. I think this is an introduction. Back on the ship, Jaren's voice boomed through the cums. Get back inside now. This is too risky. They could have attacked already, Milo said. But they didn't. They're showing trust. Trust was a strange word to use for a species that half the galaxy believed was too dangerous to study. But here he was, surrounded by baby Siltharn, who were chirping and purring like they'd found a new playmate. And not far away, the adults remained, still and watchful, making no aggressive moves. They were letting him interact with their young without interference. One of the cubs suddenly jumped off his lap and ran in a wobbly line back to its mother. The adult lowered its massive head and made a series of deep, complex sounds. The other two cubs joined in, chirping in response. Then, to Milo's shock, the adult looked directly at him and repeated one of the cub's sounds. Milo, Xiao said. I think it just copied the cub's noise. Did you hear that? I did, he replied, still stunned. I think they're trying to learn our language, or teach us theirs. Another rumble rolled from the tree line, and a second adult Siltharn stepped forward. This one was slightly smaller, with bluish scales and a graceful posture. It carried something in its mouth, not a cub, but a crystal-like object that pulsed with soft blue light. It set the object down near Milo, then backed away. What is that? Ciel asked. I don't know, Milo said. A gift? A tool? Or maybe a test. The cubs returned to him and resumed playing, completely at ease. Milo stayed on the ground with them, watching the adults and the glowing object. This wasn't just an encounter. This was the start of something bigger. They hadn't come to fight. They had come to offer something. And Milo Hart, humble xenobiologist, had just become the galaxy's first Siltharn babysitter. For 6 days, Dr. Milo Hart stayed in the clearing with the Siltharn cubs. Every morning, he stepped off the shuttle and was greeted by 3 wobbly bodies chirping with excitement. They had learned to recognize his voice, his footsteps, even his moods. When he was tired, they curled beside him. When he laughed, they chirped along. Milo gave them simple names. The curious one was Blink, the smallest was Moss, and the boldest was Rill. Each day, the adult Siltharn watched him closely, but never interfered. They stood at the edge of the clearing like silent guardians, their glowing eyes studying every movement. Milo had come to understand their behavior wasn't wild, it was careful. Everything they did had purpose. Their stillness wasn't fear. It was control. By the 7th day, something changed. Ciel's voice buzzed in Milo's earpiece early that morning. Milo, you need to come back to the shuttle, now. He glanced up from where he was sitting with Blink curled in his lap. What's wrong? We've got company, uninvited. Milo stood quickly. The cubs chirped in protest as he stepped away. He jogged back to the shuttle, pausing at the ramp. In the sky above them, 5 sharp-shaped vessels were cutting through the clouds, black and silver, bristling with weapons. The emblem of the Orion Assembly gleamed on their hulls. Why are they here? Milo asked. Jaren's voice answered grimly. Because they think the Siltharn are dangerous. They think we're in over our heads. They want to take control, Ciel added. The same group that's tried to capture unknown species before. They're not here to talk. Milo felt a cold weight settle in his chest. He looked back toward the clearing, where the cubs had gathered near the edge, sensing the tension. The adults stepped forward, slowly, placing themselves between the cubs and the sky. Then the voice came. "This is Commander Tove Ren of the Orion Assembly," said a deep, filtered tone across every frequency. "All human researchers must evacuate the surface immediately. The creatures you are interacting with are classified as potential threats." "They're children," Milo whispered. "They're not children to the Orion Assembly," Jaren said. "They're weapons." The adult Siltharn didn't move. But the light around the clearing shimmered slightly. Milo squinted. It looked like the air itself had thickened. When he blinked again, the forest beyond the clearing had changed. It was glowing all around them. The trees shimmered and transformed. Bark peeled away to reveal panels of crystal and polished metal. The forest wasn't just a forest. It was something more, something artificial and ancient. Hidden technology pulsed softly beneath the illusion of nature. "This is a city," Ciel breathed. "They built all of this. They've been hiding in plain sight." More Siltharn emerged. Not just the massive adults, but others dressed in smooth, fitted armor that shimmered like liquid light. Their movements were fluid, their eyes focused. They formed a silent circle around the humans and the cubs. "They're protecting us," Milo said. "Not just the cubs, us." Commander Ren's voice returned, louder and more aggressive. "You are in direct violation of intergalactic safety code. You will surrender the Siltharn creatures or face consequences." As he spoke, one of the assembly ships fired a warning shot, an energy beam. Aimed near the clearing dot, it never landed. The beam struck something invisible, something in the air. It spread out like ink on glass and vanished. "Shields," Jaren muttered, staring in disbelief. "They've got shields." The adult Siltharn didn't flinch. Instead, one stepped forward taller than the others, with eyes like twin suns. It made a long, echoing call that rolled through the forest like thunder. Milo felt it deep in his chest. The armored Siltharn responded in kind, forming tighter ranks, standing side by side with the humans. The cubs didn't run. They pressed against Milo, chirping softly, but not in fear. In trust. Milo turned to Jaren. "We have to tell them, the assembly. They need to know these beings aren't dangerous." Jaren shook his head. "They've made up their minds." Milo looked at Sia. "Then we don't leave." "Not yet." Above, the ships began to circle. Energy weapons powered up again, sensors flashing red. But the Siltharn didn't back down. Instead, the same lead figure stepped into the center of the clearing and raised its clawed hand. Sudden pulse of energy radiated outward. The forest lit up. The shields expanded. And then, the assembly ships froze in the sky. "Tractor fields," Ciel whispered. "They're holding the ships. All of them." "How is that possible?" Jaren asked. Milo stared at the massive Siltharn in awe. "Because they're more advanced than anyone ever imagined. They've had this power all along. But they only use it when forced." Commander Ren's voice returned, but now it trembled. "We are not here to start a war." The Siltharn made no reply. Then something remarkable happened. The lead Siltharn walked to Milo and gently touched his forehead. Images filled his mind, not words, but pictures, emotions, entire histories shared in a heartbeat. He saw peaceful cities, thriving planets, and moments of harmony between species. And he saw something else. The cubs were not a coincidence. This was a test. The Siltharn had been watching, waiting, to see how humans would respond to the most vulnerable among them. And Milo, without knowing, had given the answer they hoped for. "They've chosen us," he whispered. "They were never dangerous," Ciel said softly. "They were hopeful." Behind him, the cubs chirped in agreement. 6 months had passed. Since the day the Siltharn froze the sky. The world hadn't been the same since. News of the encounter spread fast, faster than any official broadcast could contain. At first, many were skeptical. How could a species once labeled as monsters turn out to be protectors, teachers, and guardians of knowledge beyond imagination? But the recordings from the Calypso drift were undeniable clear images of cubs playing, of adults showing patience and wisdom, of technology so advanced it made the greatest human inventions look like toys. Dr. Milo Hart now lived on Earth. Again, but not alone. Rill, Blink, and Moss had come with him, and they had grown fast. No longer the clumsy little creatures he'd met in the forest. The 3 Silthon cubs were now the size of large dogs, graceful and alert, yet still full of playful curiosity. They followed Milo everywhere, often knocking over lamps or nudging him out of his chair when they wanted attention. But he didn't mind. These weren't pets. They were family. Milo spent his mornings at the new Earth Siltharn Cultural Center, a place built not by governments, but by volunteers and dreamers, scientists, teachers, artists. The center had become a space for learning and trust building, a neutral ground where Siltharn and humans could interact. Other Siltharn had arrived, slowly at first, bringing more cubs. Each family chose their human partners carefully, watching from a distance, scanning not their brains, but their hearts. Today, a new delegation was arriving from a colony on the Fanga. Outer Rim 3 humans chosen to begin their own trust trials. Milo waited at the entrance, Rill pressed close to his leg. Blink and Moss were chasing a drone toy across the garden, their bright eyes flashing with excitement. A Siltharn transport vessel landed nearby with a soft hum, and the air shimmered gently as it powered down. The ramp opened, and Milo's heart warmed at the sight of a familiar figure. It was Ashara, the elder Siltharn who had touched his mind all those months ago. Her scales now shone with a subtle silver hue, and her posture carried calm strength. Behind her, 4 other adults followed, each carrying a tiny bundle, the new cubs. 3 humans stepped out to meet them: Lena, a quiet schoolteacher from Mars, Maro, a botanist with a love for strange plants, and Des, a young translator who had studied a dozen languages, but never expected to learn one from a creature with scales. The moment was still. Then, one of the cubs slipped from its parent's grasp and toddled forward. It wobbled on soft feet and sat directly in front of Lena, staring up at her with wide gold eyes. Lena knelt slowly, her hands trembling. The cub sniffed her hand, chirped softly, then climbed into her lap. Behind her, the adult Siltharn made a soft, approving sound. "They choose us," Milo said gently, walking over. "Not the other way around." The 2 other cubs followed, picking their partners with equal certainty. One sniffed Maro's plant-scented coat and sneezed, then curled around his ankles. The 3rd leapt into Dez's arms before he could even react. As the humans laughed and the cubs played, Milo saw Ashara approach. She didn't speak aloud, she never had, but he felt the familiar presence in his mind. This time, the vision was different. It showed stars, planets, strange beings, and a great darkness moving quietly beyond the edges of their galaxy. Something old, something watching. "They need us," Milo whispered, understanding. "They've been preparing for something." Ashara nodded slowly, not in fear, but in calm awareness. The Siltharn hadn't hidden because they were afraid. They had waited for the right allies. For species who would protect life, not try to control it. Humanity had been tested not with weapons, but with children. With trust. More ships arrived in the following weeks, Siltharn from distant places, and humans eager to join the trials. Other species began to take interest too. Some watched quietly. A few made contact, curious about what had made the Siltharn finally reveal themselves after centuries of hiding. One night, Milo stood under the stars beside Rill, watching the skies flicker with distant movement. Scout vessels, he guessed. Not Siltharn ones. Others. Maybe explorers. Maybe something else. Rill pressed against his side, letting out a quiet hum. "We're not alone anymore," Milo said softly. "And that's not a bad thing." The cub, now nearly the size of a small horse, nuzzled him with surprising gentleness. They watched the sky together until the lights faded. Later that week, a new message arrived, this time not just for Milo, but for all of Earth. It came from the Siltharn. Homeworld, spoken in perfect, slow human speech. It was short and clear. You have passed. Not with force, but with kindness. The trials will continue. Together, we prepare. And so the world changed. Not because of war or power or fear, but because a few small creatures reached out with open hearts, and someone dared to care. That, Milo knew, was the beginning of something far greater than anyone had expected. The future had arrived. And it looked a lot like trust.